Hello, welcome to this watercolour course where I'm going to be showing you different techniques that we can use to create textures using cling film. In this first session, I'm going to show you using cling film to create interesting backgrounds. So in this first session, I'm going to be showing you applying cling film to wet paint and you get some interesting textures forming, and there's two different ways of doing that, and I'm going to show you those. I'm just going to hold this up to the camera so hopefully you can see a little bit closer. Hopefully you can see that you can get some beautiful textures appearing when the cling film squashes into the paint. You do need to leave this to dry sometime, but I will explain that in a little while when I do the demo. It's quite nice to use 2 or 3 colours, as you can see. So another colour combination here. And I'm just going to show you another one here that's more in greens and blues. This one. Hopefully you can see the textures here. So that's one way of doing it. The other way you can do is, this is just using paint and cling film. And I've got some other examples here where it gets slightly more advanced when we're going to start applying plant material to the wet paint, then putting cling film over, and then we're going to drizzle underneath either ink or another colour paint. So you can see you can build up some beautiful, quite complex shapes. Can you see little bits of fern leaf there? You just get little indications of little bits of leaf and things that you've applied. There's another one here. You can see that. And it's another, just slightly different colour combinations, as you can see. And I've got some images here of some others that I've created before. These are actually, I don't think I've got these ones anymore. I think these are sold. But you can see that this one is lovely. It's got these little fern leaves, little bits of grass and various little bits of foliage in there. And then you can hopefully see these ones as well. Hopefully you can see those. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so before you start, you really do need for this your paper taped to a board, because you're going to be sort of needing it nice and secure so you can hold it. Okay, the other thing you want to do is get your paints all mixed up ready. I'm going to be using for this demo, I'm going to be using some phthalo blue, a little bit of burnt sienna and a touch of lemon yellow. Get them all mixed up so you've got plenty of paint, because you can't be faffing around and trying to mix up more once you've started with this one. You need to just keep going, because it actually needs to be nice and wet when you put the cling film on. If it's dried at all, then the cling film won't adhere to it and you won't get your textures appearing if it's dry. It's drying off. The other thing you obviously need to get ready is get ready your piece of cling film. So I've cut a piece of cling film that I know is plenty big enough. And I'm actually just going to very lightly scrunch it a tiny bit first. It will sort of scrunch as you put it on, but just a little bit. And I'm going to very carefully put that to one side there so I can grab it when I need it in a second. Okay, so I've also put a piece of newspaper underneath, because you might get drips and runs a little bit when you're doing this. And get some kitchen roll ready in case you do get a little bit of a puddle or anything. Right, so I'm actually going to apply a little bit of water to the paper, not too much. Just a little. I'm going to have some wet areas and some dry areas so the paint goes on slightly differently. This will just give you a little bit more time to work. Just a little bit like that. That will do. I'm only just using a small piece of A5 paper for this demo, and I suggest you probably do the same. I would suggest you will probably want to try this a couple of times to get the feel of it. All right, so that's my water put on. I'm going to start off with lightest colours first. I'm going to put little touches of lemon yellow, and I'm not going to put a huge amount on, just there we are, sort of spread it through in the centre section there. And I'm going to get some of my lovely phthalo blue. You can see it's nice and wet. There you go. Now I'm going to just clean my brush and get some of the burnt sienna. Just put a couple of little splats there, and I'm also going to put just a couple of little daubs of phthalo there, so it mixes nicely. And then I'm going to get a little tiny touch of lemon yellow. Just put a couple of touches. That's it. So hopefully I get some nice interesting colour combinations appearing. That's the plan. Now I've already got a bit of a drizzle of puddle here, so I'm just going to mop that up before I start. I can see I've got a bit of a puddle there and there. Right, so what I'm now going to do is I'm going to get my cling film. If you wanted to, you could allow your paint to run a little bit one into the other, just a bit. It's a bit dark there actually. Before I start, I'm actually just going to a couple more touches of the lemon in there. That's it, just to break it up a tiny bit, because it's got a little bit dark looking in that bit there. Right, now get my cling film, and I can see that it's all lovely and wet. And I'm now going to put my cling film down, and hopefully you can see straight away that where it adheres, you get these lovely patterns. One of the, can you see that hopefully you can sort of see that you've already, where it's there, you can see where patterns are going to be. If you want it to be a bit more slightly more shaped, I'm just going to say you can actually tweak it just a little bit. You don't want to play around too much, but you can just grab it a little bit, just see if you can tweak it a little bit, and you can actually at this stage tweak and pull it in a bit. Can you see that? To make the marks a bit more, some of them are a little bit big, so I'm just going to bring those in just a tiny bit so it's a bit more interesting, hopefully. The other thing you can do, you can actually get your finger and sort of squidge the paint a little bit underneath if you think, oh, that would look nicer if that mixed a bit more in that section, for example. One other thing I just wanted to show you, hopefully you can sort of see that, is if you want an area that's a bit lighter, if you actually, where the cling film is actually lifted up slightly, ooh, you get a light patch, and I'm just going to try and do that in a couple of places to show you. So you can tweak it slightly. Hopefully, can you just see, hopefully you can see that, where I've lifted up the cling film, I've got lighter little patches in there. Do that on a couple of little bits here. So I've got a couple of little lighter areas just in the middle. There, that'll do. Don't want too much there. All right, so you get the idea. So you can see it's quite quick. You need to have everything completely ready before you start this. All right, now I'm going to clear away and I'm going to show you the next technique. Okay, so for our second technique, we're going to be doing the same thing again, but this time when the cling film's applied, you're going to drip underneath either some more paint or some ink in a contrasting colour and let it trickle through the creases in the cling film. Okay, so that's the second technique we're going to try. So I'm going to be using, I've got my cling film ready, I'm going to be using rose madder and a little bit of cobalt blue, and I've sort of mixed up some, put water first, get ahead of myself. I better wet the paper thoroughly first before I do anything else. Get a bigger brush. That'll just give me a little bit more time to work. Right, there we are. That will do. I've got a bit of hair on there. Get off. There. Okay. So I'm gonna go in. Right, hopefully you can see. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to, trying to squidge that bit of blue about, I'm going to use some ink underneath now. So you will need either another pointy brush or a pipette. All right, and what you want to do, you can mix up another colour paint. Usually it works best either with a darker colour or a very much lighter colour. Okay, so it's a nice contrast. And remember, it's going to mix a little bit with what the colours that there. So you want something that's not going to make horrible muddy colours. Think about how it's going to mix. And I'm going to trickle some underneath. I'm going to be actually using some ink. I'm going to be using some, you can either use drawing inks or acrylic inks, which is fine. I'm going to be using an acrylic ink. This is just because I happen to have the right colour in that, but I usually use drawing ink. I'm going to use a burnt umber. I'm going to show you the colour. I practiced sort of tested. I wanted a sort of browny colour. Now this one is the burnt umber, which is a slightly more rusty brown, or I could have used sepia, which is quite a dark brown, but I chose to use, I'm going to have a little go with this one, and just to have practice. All right, remember these are practices. We are going to be using these techniques later on in the course to actually create parts of landscape images. Okay, but at this stage we are just doing this. Just have a little play and see what happens. All right, so don't get too worried about it. So take that out. I'm actually going to be using my pipette. Okay, I've got a pipette here, and what I need to do, I'm going to have to try and do it so you can see what I'm doing. Normally, I'm just going to show you, I would turn the board towards me like this, okay? But I'm going to try and turn the board away from me like that, so hopefully you can see. All right, it's a plan. Now I'm going to hold it up a little bit. Hopefully you can see that. I will try and let you see that a bit better in a moment, but I'm just going to hold that up, and I'm going to lift the cling film just a tiny bit and trickle under some ink. Only do a little tiny bit at a time. Hopefully you can see I put some ink under there. Right, I've changed my water because it was filthy. I've now just sucked up a little bit of blue, the cobalt blue paint in my pipette. And what I'm going to try and do, I'm just going to squirt a little bit under here. And I'm going to lift it up. I'm just going to see if I can push a little bit of blue into that, so it's not all just brown. I don't know if I've made a huge mistake doing this, so I'll just have to see. So I'm then going to go that way. Don't panic straight away. I know it looks much too much at the moment, but I'm just hoping it will just start to merge in with the other colours a little bit. Letting it go. Don't panic. At this stage, don't panic. Now let's go down that way. So hopefully you can see that's broken it up a little bit. I might just put a tiny bit in here. So you do need to be a bit careful. The more you fiddle, the more chance you have of ending up mud. But I'm just going to put a little bit in there. See if I can, sorry, I can't show you. See if I can get that to trickle down. Trickle, trickle. Right, I'm just going to put a bit more blue over this side as well, and then I will come back and show you. Okay. Right, that's all I'm going to do to this one. I'm frightened I'm going to ruin it. So I've actually gone in after the brown ink and actually just with some blue paint, I put a little bit of some blue here, here, here and here under the cling film, and then let it run in different directions. And hopefully you can see that that's broken up the colour. So if you end up having a big blob of one colour, you can be very careful and add another one. Hope you can see that though, that's trickled under the different creases in the cling film, and we need to put that to one side. I didn't say on the other sample, we will need to leave these. I usually do leave these overnight just to dry, okay? It's safer to do that. If you try and take the cling film off when it's at least a bit damp, some of the lovely textures just disappear and the colours merge together, and that's not what you want after taking that much trouble. Just leave it alone, be patient, and then look at it the next day. All right, I'm going to show you one more technique, which is building on this one again. This time we're going to add some little bits of leaf and things to the wet paint before we put the cling film on. Okay, before you start the third technique, you will need to collect a little bit of foliage. Now, I'm filming this in the middle of February, so by the time you get to do this, there will be a little bit more about. So I've collected a few bits of dried things, some little dried seed pods, some little bits of grass. You want things that are going to be quite delicate, all right? Don't get anything too bulky, anything too thick, but also too denser shape. You want airy fairy sort of things. Otherwise, you're going to get great big blobs in here rather than have some nice things going on. I'm just going to show you some of the sort of things I'm going to be using, and then I'm also then just going to show you some samples of the sorts of things you're going to be hopefully achieving. So you can see nice little leaves that have actually got quite open, quite delicate, all right, this sort of thing. So you want to get a collection of those, and before you actually create your picture, what I tend to do is actually get one or two things and actually sort of place it on and think about what you might want to use and roughly where you want to put it, and get those in a pile next to you before you put them on. Okay, so I find that's the easiest way to go. So I'm now going to show you some samples before I do the demo. Now I'm just going to show you these as a sort of reminder of the sorts of things we're going to be doing. So hopefully you can see we've got some interesting sort of shapes and things here and little things. This is where I've placed leaves and things over the paint under the cling film. All right, hopefully that just reminds you of the sorts of things. Brilliant. Okay, so you obviously want to think about what sort of colours you might want to use as for your paints, but also we're going to trickle ink or paint underneath again, so think about which colour you might want to use for that as well and get it all ready. Right, this time I'm going to go with A4 paper, give me a bit more room to put some foliage on. Now I'm going to wet it again and get a bigger brush. Wet before we start. I'm going to be using similar colours to last time. I'm going to be using cobalt blue and a bit of rose madder to get shades of sort of lilac-y purples. And then I'm going to be using over the top that I'm going to apply with a pipette, I'm going to be using a little bit of Prussian blue and some permanent rose. So I'm hoping they're mixed to get shades of darker blue and pink, but maybe some darker purples as well. That's the plan. It's all very random and hit and miss, as you can see with this technique, so you have to just wait and see what happens. Just let it move a bit. Right, now foliage. So I've sort of got a little bit of an idea where I want to put these. So I'm putting them face down, these leaves. Put one about there. just dropping them on quite quickly. I'm aware that this is going to be drying if I'm not speedy. So I'm going to I've got a nice little bit of grass I'm going to put here. Some other little bits of grass going to go sort of across there. I've got some tiny little bits of dropped off, actually, some tiny little bit of fluffy bits of grass. I'm just going to sprinkle those around down here. So I've got little bits, little tiny bits just down there where they're broken off. Put those in there, a bit random. Right, but something missing here, isn't there? I'm just going to get another little leaf and pop it there because that's a bit empty. And just there, something else. Just think, I might put something else there. Trying to be quick as well. That's the thing. You don't want to be too long or it's going to dry. I think that's probably enough. Hopefully, I have got some grass across here. I don't know if you can see that. I might just put one more leaf there. Just there. Okay, I think that's enough. I'm going to try and get the cling film on now. I'm a little bit worried it's starting to dry. So what I'm going to do, I'm at this stage, I'm going to get a bit more paint and I'm going to flick a little bit more paint on it because I'm just a little bit worried it's starting to dry off a bit. So I'm just flicking a little bit of paint on now. So I'll make sure something's going to happen because I don't want to go to all this trouble and then you're not going to be able to see what we've done because it's dried too quickly. There. Hopefully that'll be fine now. Hope. Right, cling film. I've got my cling film. I'm going to put on the top. Press down. Now you see, obviously, all of these leaves things are holding the cling film away from the paper. That's why you can't have anything too bulky. Anything too bulky, and it won't make an impression, as you can see, hopefully, what I mean. All right. So I'm just, where I can see here, it's dried out in this corner. I'm just re-wetting, getting a little bit more paint under there now, quickly. That's it. Just so that I could see that and in these, it's just these corners actually, because not a lot going on there. That's it. Again, this one at the top is, as I say, it's similar actually. Just get a little bit of water, a little bit more paint, and just hopefully that will go under there and here. A similar thing going on. Just that these edges sort of starting to dry out a bit. I can see here as well, starting to dry out just there. You can see where it's not sticking, and then you can just put on a little bit more. Okay, there you go. Right. Well, hopefully you can see that it's starting to get little shapes. So what we do now is we get a pipette with some colour in again, and we're going to very lightly try and trickle around the leaves and things. Okay, so I've got, move my palette over. I have got ready, I have got some Prussian blue and a little bit of permanent rose I've got here. That's right. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a lighter colour, the permanent rose. So this is paint rather than ink this time. Okay, so I'm going to hold it if I hold it that way, I don't know if you could see. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lift this, get a little bit of the ink and squirt there, and see if I can get that to run a little bit. So at this stage, what I'm going to say, all of these you need to leave them to dry overnight, okay? The one with the foliage on, what I'm going to do now, so I find you get a much better impression of the foliage and leaves if you put this down on, put this down with some newspaper over the top or some scrap paper and something heavy on the top, sort of book or another book, you know, stiff cardboard, you know, a bit of cardboard with some books over the top or something, just to weight it right down and press the leaves against the paint, and then you get a much better impression. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so I've let everything dry overnight. This is the first one I did, and I've taken the cling film off. As you can see, it does actually dry quite pale. You get sort of areas, but you can still hopefully see some interesting bits of pattern in there. And I'm just going to show you the difference between that and the one we did where I put ink underneath. I'm going to take the cling film off so you can see revealed, and hopefully you can see with this one you get much more definite patterns. You get the, you know, the areas in between, the creases and things are actually much more definite. Okay, actually it's quite nice. And I'm now going to show you the one where we put the plants in and the different materials. I'm just going to very carefully peel this off. And what you want to do is you want to just take some time carefully lifting off your plant materials. Carefully. They may be a bit stuck, don't panic, just take your time and ease them off. So I'm just going to take all these plants off and then I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, and hopefully you can see now I've taken all the sort of foliage and leaves off here, and you get some really nice imprints. Obviously some things work better than others. I'm just going to hold this up to the camera. Little fern leaves work particularly well. Really like this little leaf here. It's sort of a cow parsley type plant, I think, there. Got some nice little tiny leaves here, and this has worked well. This is, I can't know what it's called, it's a sort of funny sticky weed that sticks to you. That's actually worked really nice. So I really quite like that. I've got a little bit of grass up here as well. If you can see the texture there, we've got a little bit of grassy texture there. I just want to show you one other thing you can do. If you've got areas that are a little bit dark or not terribly interesting, you can very lightly, you have to just be careful with this, but you can get a little bit of water on a brush, and obviously because watercolours are re-wettable, you can't, obviously if it's ink, you can't lift ink, okay, but you can lift paint. So I'm just going to show you sort of here, for example, just going to very lightly wet, so you don't want to lift too much off, but you can just go in, just dabbing these with a little bit of water, and you can lift. I just do a couple of sections. You can see if you want to, you can emphasize areas just to bring that out again. I just do work my way down here so you can sort of see what I'm doing. Lift with a tissue. I'll hold this up a bit nearer the camera in a second just so you can see. You don't want to take too much of the colour out, but just emphasising those shapes a little bit more. Just going in, lifting up some of that colour just a little bit. And here, where it's very, very dark blue, I could lift a little bit of that out. So I'm just going to come in. Be careful, because obviously if you put your water over where the marks are, the marks will disappear. So you just need to be quite careful when you do this. I'm going to hopefully show you that. So you can see that that's actually brought those shapes out a little bit more because they were a bit dark. It sort of disappeared. So you can do that in a couple of different areas if you want to. I've got one. I'm just going to grab one that I've done previously in this way, just to lift out some shapes, just to show you what I mean. So I'm just going to grab that now and show you. Well, hopefully you can see in this one that some of the shapes, they're a lot more definite. So what I have done, I've just taken a damp brush and I've just lifted out, just like I did before, taken a damp brush, lifted out some of the paint and sort of just do the clean tissue and lift out some of the areas to sort of let them show up a little bit more. I can just sort of see that if I lift it up a bit more. So that is something you can do to sort of edit and refine areas if you want to. Now this technique is most useful. I mean, it's quite nice to do it now, but it's when we do the next session, we're going to be using these techniques to create a little moorland landscape. I'm going to show you some images, and the lifting out technique can come in very useful. Before we go on and talk about what we're doing next, I'm just going to re-show you the three different techniques. Okay. Okay, so just a reminder, so this is the most advanced one where you put the leaves and the foliage on and you drip. This one had paint dripped underneath, so I could lift it, or you can drip inks underneath, okay, and you let it dry with a weighted down on the top so you get some nice impressions. And I just want to show you the difference between these two. This one is the one that was just cling film, but it had ink dripped underneath, and you can see it actually does emphasize the texture quite a lot. Actually, the only drawback with this is because this is ink, you can't lift the ink off. I could lift the paint off where these bits are painted. I could lift that, but the ink is permanent once it's dry, so you won't be able to lift that off. So that can be a little bit of a drawback sometimes if it goes in the wrong place. Or there is just putting the cling film on the paint, but the texture is a little bit more sort of paler, as you can see. You get still get some nice textures, but it's not quite so defined. All right, so that's the three different techniques. What I'm now going to show you is what we're going to be doing next session to use these techniques. Okay, so in the next session, we are going to use the cling film technique to create a landscape image. Now, all these three images have been done just by pressing cling film into the paint. Okay. Now I'm just going to show you. I'm going to hold them up a little bit closer, so hopefully you can sort of see some of the texture here in this area here. So the cling film was obviously put on this area here. This one here, the cling film was put over this area here. Then I've used the lifting out technique. As you can see, I've lifted out a little pathway and I've lightened up a couple of little areas. I have also gone in and just darkened a couple of little areas, but obviously that's something I can be showing you next time, just to emphasize some areas. And this one here, I've put obviously cling film in this area, and I've darkened some areas here. All right, so as you can see, hopefully you can see that this technique, it works really nicely to give you some sort of nice textural qualities to look like sort of craggy, rocky sort of areas. Those are done just with the cling film, no inks or anything dripped underneath. I'm just going to show you, I've got a couple of others here that are done. These have been done, and I will hold these up to the camera so you can see. These both have been done where I've actually then let something trickle under the cling film. So this one, both of them have been done using inks, but you could use paint. So this one's been done, I'm just going to show you, this one here has been done where I've dripped a little bit of brown and a little bit of white ink under the cling film. So obviously these are both quite sort of wintry scenes. This one has been done where I've just dripped a little bit of white under the cling film, so that I was trying to get crackly, frosty sort of patterns on these. So what I'm going to do in the next session is I'm going to demonstrate how to create a little landscape. So you don't need to have an image to work from necessarily. You can make it up, or if you'd rather have something in front of you so you can get some sort of idea, then that's probably, you might find it easier to have some sort of moorland image in front of you. So hopefully you have a bit of fun with these techniques. And I really look forward to seeing what you've done, particularly using the leaves. Once you start putting the leaves and things like that underneath, they're very, very exciting to create backgrounds. All right then, I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye.